The so-called love triangle murder trial has been underway in Austin, Texas since November 1st. In Texas v. Kaitlin Armstrong, the defendant is accused of stalking and murdering her romantic rival before fleeing to Costa Rica, where she dyed her hair, got plastic surgery, and apparently went by no less than 3 aliases. The victim's name was Mo Wilson, and the prosecution claims that Kaitlin was insanely jealous of Mo after Mo dated Kaitlin's on and off boyfriend, Colin Strickland, during one of Kaitlin and Colin's off periods. As always, if you are new to this case and you want to get the background context on this before seeing this recap of day 6 of the trial, in the description below, there is a link to a playlist with all of the prior videos. The court is allowing cameras in the courtroom only for opening statements, closing arguments, and the verdict. So in between, I am making recap videos of all of the testimony. We live streamed the opening statements on this channel when they happened, and when closing arguments also happen, we will be live streaming that along with the verdict as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and the opening statements and closing arguments live streams will also be in the same playlist. Anyway, on day 5, the jury heard some damaging information about Kaitlin. This was including multiple times that she apparently said that she wanted to unalive Mo to a couple of her friends. This also included some forensic data that was pulled from her devices showing that she had made some very questionable Google searches while she was in Costa Rica. And on day 6, the prosecution called 6 more witnesses. These included the homicide detective who interviewed Kaitlin, a translator who translated various documents from Spanish into English, and the U.S. Marshals deputy who ultimately brought Kaitlin back to the United States. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so day 6 started out with Brian Bell, the vice president of global communications at Strava. If you remember, he ended the day's testimony on day 5. On the morning of day 6, the jury got to see his cross-examination. I mentioned in the previous recap that I really would have preferred to see someone sent from Strava that was some kind of an engineer, some sort of a data engineer, maybe the head engineer at Strava. And this was so that they could speak to more of the details or nuances of the data coming from the platform. And from what I could tell from his cross-examination, this probably actually would have been helpful. Apparently, the defense revealed some contradictions in Bell's testimony. And ultimately, this led to a question as to whether or not this data is reliable enough, or at least as reliable as it initially appeared on direct examination, or on the other hand, maybe it's just harder to comprehend. Either way, there's a little bit of clarity that's lacking there for the jury. So I stand by what I said before. I really do think that some sort of a data engineer would have been more helpful to testify on behalf of Strava. Then again, given the fact that we couldn't see the testimony for ourselves, I don't know just how damaging this cross-examination actually was for his testimony. Maybe the jury ended up disregarding Mr. Bell's testimony, or maybe they still found it credible or compelling enough to be able to place some weight in it. Anyway, the second witness of the day was Detective Katy Connor. She's the officer that conducted Kaitlin's interview at the Austin Police Department before Kaitlin fled to Costa Rica. And then after Kaitlin was apprehended and brought directly to Houston, Detective Connor did a second interview, which this time was an interrogation apparently. Of course, there is a video recording of the May 12th interview, and so the jury got to watch this in court. Per the video, Kaitlin was actually arrested under a warrant for a different alleged crime. Specifically, the warrant was for theft of service. Under Texas Penal Code Section 31.04, theft of service is when someone obtains services from someone by means of threat or deception with the intent of avoiding payment. Or it's when someone refuses to pay for services after they have already been rendered. So we don't know any of the details as to how this sort of came about for Kaitlin, but that apparently was a warrant that was already out for her. And at the beginning of this interview, Detective Connor says that she wants to talk to Kaitlin about the warrant and about a separate matter that she wants some information about. This, of course, is Mo's killing. Now, Kaitlin responds to this by asking Detective Connor if she needs an attorney. This is an important FYI for anyone that ever finds themselves talking to the police for basically any reason. It's commonly understood that someone in police custody has the right to an attorney, and that there's something called Miranda rights that get read to someone when they get arrested. If someone is in police custody and in an interrogation, and that person at some point says that they want to have a lawyer present for the interrogation, the officer is supposed to stop the questioning until an attorney is present. However, there are certain requirements that everyone should understand in order for this to be triggered. First, those Miranda rights, which include the right to have an attorney, they get triggered when someone is in police custody. This includes when someone is physically handcuffed, but that's not necessarily the only situation when someone is in police custody. It also includes situations where the police might say that the person is not allowed to go anywhere, that they have to remain where they are. So if someone is very clearly being told by the police that they are not required to stay, that person can say they want an attorney, but that police officer can continue that questioning regardless. And this is because that person has the option to just get up and walk away without any kind of consequences. Now, a second point I want to make is that if the person is in custody and they indicate that they want to have a lawyer present, they have to do so clearly and unambiguously. Otherwise, it's not enough to trigger the police officer to stop the interrogation. So here, at this point in the interview, we have Kaitlin, who's been arrested under a warrant for a separate matter. So she is in custody. This means that she can invoke her right to an attorney and end the conversation. But her problem here is that she's not clear enough. You see, she asked the police if she needed an attorney. She didn't say, I want an attorney present and I don't want to talk to you until I have an attorney here with me. Because she didn't do that, because she asked the question, she asked if she needed one, Detective Connor could continue the questioning even though Kaitlin was in custody. Now, conveniently enough, not long after this, Detective Connor goes out and then comes back in. And the next thing she says is, so it turns out that your birth date on the warrant doesn't match your actual birth date, so it's not a valid warrant and you're no longer under arrest. You can leave whenever you want, but I still want to talk to you because I want to get your side of things. And then Kaitlin says, I want an attorney. But like I said, for those magic words to work, Kaitlin has to be in police custody, even though she's sitting in literally the exact same spot that she was just a moment ago when she was technically under arrest. She's now been told that she's not under arrest, so she's therefore no longer in police custody. So therefore, it's like magic words that don't work. And there's something here that Detective Connor does very well here, which is to make it very clear that Kaitlin has an opportunity to leave, that the door is unlocked, she is free to go whenever she wants, and that anything Kaitlin says to Detective Connor at this point is voluntary and consensual. And as Detective Connor continues to ask some more questions, Kaitlin doesn't really give concrete answers, but instead says multiple times, I would like to leave. And each time Detective Connor says something like, that's totally fine, you're free to go, that's your choice, but we want your side of the story. And in court, Detective Connor noted that the thing that was a red flag for her was Kaitlin's body language during that interview. Even when Kaitlin was saying multiple times that she wanted to leave, her body was completely still, she said. She didn't move or even gesture towards the door. And Detective Connor explained that interviews and interrogations are often a bit of a dance between the interviewer and the interviewee, since they're both essentially trying to get information from one another. The police officer is trying to get information as to what the person brought in knows, and the person brought in is also trying to figure out how much do the police know. So Detective Connor testified that she interpreted Kaitlin's stillness in those moments as Kaitlin wanting, at least on some level, to stay to get information as to what the police knew about Mo's murder. Anyway, aside from this, the prosecution also introduced through Detective Connor photos of items that were found in Kaitlin's bag after she was apprehended and brought to Houston. These included a paper with a receipt for cosmetic surgery dated June 23rd, 2022 for $6,350 for someone named Allison Page. This seems to be one of her handful of aliases that she was using in Costa Rica. Then there was also a United Airlines boarding pass with the name Kaitlin Armstrong on it, going from Newark Airport to San Jose Airport in Costa Rica, not the one in San Francisco area, on May 18th, 2022. Then there were also photos of credit cards belonging to Kaitlin, plus one belonging to Colin. And of course, there's Christine Elizabeth Armstrong's passport showing a stamp for Kaitlin's arrival in Costa Rica on May 18th, 2022. Okay, now the third witness of the day was Michael Allen, the lab manager for the forensics lab at the United States Secret Service. His testimony was simple. You see, often it's the case that local law enforcement doesn't have the tools or the software to essentially break into someone's phone. So apparently the US Secret Service often works with local law enforcement to help provide this kind of a service. And that's essentially what Mr. Allen did in this case. He said he did not analyze the data, but he just obtained the passcode and then extracted the data from Kaitlin's phone. Anyway, the fourth witness of the day was Deputy Emir Perez with the United States Marshals Service. Maybe it's just because I watched The Fugitive too many times during my 90s childhood, but I just found his testimony to be so cool.
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
This guy got to spend time in Costa Rica for a month during like May and June. It seems like a good time to be in Costa Rica, talking with bartenders and waiters and hostel managers and people like that, trying to find Kaitlin after she fled the United States. And then when he found her, he got to bring her back on a plane straight to Houston. Anyway, he said to start off, the Austin Police Department contacted the US Marshals on May 18th asking for their help. And basically, they were able to figure out pretty much right away that Kaitlin had fled to Costa Rica. So he flew there pretty much immediately. Now, because international investigations rely on local resources, he said this was basically old-fashioned police work. In my head, I'm imagining a couple guys with like super cropped haircuts and Hawaiian t-shirts or like some kind of beach chic and like sandals walking around and interviewing waiters and bartenders and things like that, trying to, find someone who's seen Kaitlin or could point them in the right direction as to where she might be. And the difficult part was Costa Rica is kind of a good place for a single white woman with a yoga mat to hide. It's like the pumpkin spice latte of travel destinations. And that is not at all a dig at Costa Rica. I am about as basic as they come. But basically my point is that she was able to hide fairly well with a lot of tourists that had a similar description as her. Ultimately though, on June 29th, 2022, Deputy Perez got information that Kaitlin may be staying at a particular hostel. And when he and his partner arrived, they saw her sitting on the patio with some unidentified man. At first, he said that he wasn't really sure it was her because her hair was darker than expected and she had a bandage on her nose, but she looked a little bit different. But he says he recognized her eyes. And when he and his partner tried talking to her in Spanish, asking something about the hostel, she apparently couldn't respond without a translator. So Perez alerted the local authorities so they could make the arrest, as is required in these kinds of situations. And Costa Rican authorities deported her on the basis of an illegal entry. So then she was brought right back to Texas on a flight to Houston. Okay, so witness number 5 was actually just an interpreter translating some written evidence from Spanish to English. There were a number of documents, particularly those involving Dr. Jorge Bodilla, a plastic surgeon in Costa Rica. One of these documents was a series of online messages between Kaitlin and Dr. Bodilla, where she was asking about his availability the next day for an appointment. In these messages, she asks multiple times if he's willing to throw in extra fillers. And then in a separate document, there is a bill of service for quote-unquote Allison Page. This, of course, matches a photo of a receipt that the jury had previously seen taken out of Kaitlin's suitcase, which was for cosmetic surgery billed to someone named Allison Page. And then there was another document showing pricing options for various rhinoplasty packets. And one of these packets appeared to match the price on that receipt that was found in Kaitlin's luggage. Okay, on to the final witness of the day. This was Detective Daniel Portnoy, an Austin PD officer who's been working in digital forensics for about 4 to 5 years. He was actually qualified as an expert to testify on data from mobile, digital, and infotainment devices. He testified that the electronic evidence in this case includes 5 iPhones and 2 laptops. It also, of course, includes the infotainment system in Kaitlin's Jeep. Detective Portnoy testified that he extracted data from the Jeep that includes something called navigation events. These indicate the times that the vehicle is on and running. And basically, there were 2 navigation events on May 11th, 2022 that Detective Portnoy analyzed. And basically, this data was able to show where her Jeep was driving starting at 7:04 p.m. But that's all the information I have for day 6. This is yet another day of receipts, and it just goes to show just how much data all of our devices are carrying on all of us, for better or for worse. But those are my thoughts. What do you think about day 6? What piece of evidence was most crucial to you on this day? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more trial recaps like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. See you in the next one.